I love barbecue ribs, and I've cooked them many different ways, but I think this way is my favorite. It's fast because we're going to use a pressure cooker. It's flavorful because I'm going to use a dry rub on the ribs, and you make a sauce at the end that you can smother the ribs with. It's perfect. So we're going to use a rack of baby back ribs here for this recipe. Baby back ribs are more tender than other ribs, and I'm going to put a spice rub on. I've mixed together some smoked paprika, dry mustard, thyme, oregano, and some chili powder. Of course, I'm going to put a little salt in as well, and I'm going to rub this all over the rack of ribs. And you're only going to use this spice rub once. If there's any left over, you're going to discard it. We're going to do both sides. So let's cut these into 3 or 4 rib sections. It doesn't really matter, but we want to make sure they're going to be able to fit in the bottom of our pressure cooker. Now I'm going to preheat the pressure cooker using the brown setting. So press brown, let it heat up. You can also do this on the stove top. If your cooker doesn't have a brown setting, just heat a pan, add some oil, sear it. So once you've preheated your pressure cooker, add a little bit of oil to the bottom there. Now you're never going to get the underside of the rib brown, so we're just going to brown that top curved part. You can move it around if you want to a little bit, but make sure you don't overcrowd your pan. If you overcrowd your pan, you're not going to brown effectively. Now we're going to start to build a flavorful base over which we're going to steam these ribs. So in goes some onion. So once the onions start to get a little bit tender, that's about 3 to 4 minutes, we're going to add a bay leaf and some really good quality beef stock. That's the basis for our sauce coming up at the end of this recipe, so it's really important that it tastes good now. Let this come to a simmer. We're going to use the rack and put this rack in here. Now, if you don't have a rack with your pressure cooker, you can make one yourself. You can use crumpled up aluminum foil that is shaped into a snake and put the ribs on top of that, or you could even use whole carrots and whole celery, which will add flavor to your stock, and just put the ribs on top of those. So we're going to grab our ribs and we're going to put them onto that rack. Now you can put them so that they're overlapping on top of each other. That's no problem at all. Load them in, and now we're going to put the lid on. We're going to make sure the pressure limiting valve is set to airtight, and we're going to set this for anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes, depending on how falling apart tender you want your ribs. If you want that meat to fall off the bone just by looking at it, set it for 40 minutes. Otherwise, if you like to have a little bit of chewiness left to your ribs, set it for 30 minutes. Or if you happen to have this particular pressure cooker, you could just press the button that says ribs. When the time is up on the pressure cooker, we're going to do a natural pressure release. Whenever you're cooking large pieces of meat or meat on the bone, they always are more tender if you can just take the time to let the pressure drop naturally. So depending on how much food you have in there, this also could take 10 to 15 minutes. So just turn the cooker off and let it sit. In the meantime, we're going to put together the ingredients that we're going to use to make our sauce. For that, we have some ketchup, we have some molasses, we have some cider vinegar, some tomato paste, and some soy sauce. So whisk this together. So I just heard that valve drop. It's time to open this up and remove the ribs. Now they're not going to look too pretty just now, but just wait. Once we get the sauce on them, they'll be great. So remove the ribs, set them aside, and this is a perfect time actually to let the meat rest. We're going to mix that sauce into the delicious beef stock with the onions and simmer it on the brown setting for about 5 minutes. So I've let this simmer for about 5 minutes. You let it simmer for as long as you want until it gets to the consistency that you like. Now our ribs that have been resting are going to go back into that sauce to get completely coated and warmed through just a tiny bit. Yum, yum. Okay, now I'm going to put them out onto a platter, onto a serving plate. Remember, you're going to do as many ribs as you have people. I think one rack serves maybe 3 people, but probably more like 2 people. So 2 people per rack, and here they come. They're gorgeous. That's a good looking, delicious, and quick rack of ribs.